Solar PV provides clean, renewable energy which reduces your carbon footprint and your reportable greenhouse gas emissions.
These myths don't seem to ever go away. I've been in the business for 10 years now, and we have seen these same things crop up every time. It is a myth that you can only have a south roof to install solar PV on. That's completely untrue.
We have and are seeing several customers who've started by simply backing their energy supply with zero carbon sources like renewable and nuclear, and then moving on to more physical solutions like on-site solar and EV charging facilities. And in my personal opinion, there is a certain pleasure in seeing a physical renewable asset on your own site, which gives solar PV a uniqueness.
Welcome to the third in the Talking Power series of podcasts by The Energist and EDF. I'm Tim McMahon-Smith, editor of The Energist. And today we're joined by Raghav Singh, Head of Large Business at EDF, and Rob Murphy, Sales and Origination Director, SAS Energy, and EDF Renewable C&I Solar Division. We're going to speak about how solar PV can give energy security and provide a vital tool in assisting companies' net zero ambitions. Welcome, Raghav and Rob.
Thanks very much, Tim. Last time we spoke, I was representing my role as Head of Large Business within EDF, talking about corporate PPAs. Today, I'm representing EDF Renewables UK and Ireland around the subject of solar PV. So back in September, SAS Energy became a wholly owned subsidiary of EDF Renewables UK and Ireland. It's a Kent-based solar PV company with over 30 solar experts and a portfolio of over 45 projects in development and construction.
My name's Rob Murphy. I'm the Sales Director for SAS Energy, which is an EDF company. Just to give you a little bit of background, I joined SAS Energy just over 10 years ago. At the time, I was brought in to look after the agricultural sector, which was booming at the time due to EU funding. My team and I look after and handle all of renewable inquiries into the business.
Thank you, Rob. Raghav, if you remember the last episode when we talked about corporate PPAs, how does on-site solar fit into this?
Yeah, the podcast from back in February focused on corporate PPAs, which typically link the power purchaser with an off-site solar or wind generator by way of a contract. Today's very much about on-site, or what we call behind-the-meter generation.
So what are the key benefits of on-site solar generation to a business?
Well, you could split those into three high-level areas, Tim. Firstly, the financial benefits. So the power generated by way of on-site generation is what we call fully delivered, unlike energy from the grid, which comes with non-energy costs bolted on. Mm-hmm. So therefore, the energy could come at a potentially attractive rate if it's funded via a power purchase agreement, or can deliver a healthy return on investment or payback period when it's self-funded. It also then serves to protect against market volatility. In terms of the environmental benefits, solar PV provides clean, renewable energy which reduces your carbon footprint and your reportable greenhouse gas emissions, and it offers a truly tangible way to supplement your ESG strategy and credentials. And lastly, in terms of operational benefits, solar PV systems are a proven, high reliability and low maintenance source of generation. They offer a stable and secure energy source, therefore reducing the risk of power outages and the need for grid capacity, which is an ongoing issue in the present market.
And what are the challenges that a buyer should be aware of, Rob?
Well, the challenges really aren't challenges in my mind. So, if we take an example of upfront cost, obviously there can be a sizable CapEx expenditure at the beginning of a project, but we can offer funding for a PPA or for a lease agreement. Other challenges within the industry at the moment are limitations on grid, but again, there is a solution to that, which is G100 export limitation. That allows us to be able to go and restrict any energy returning back to grid via some rather clever switchgear, if you like.
Yeah.
And that's a very cheap and innovative way now to prevent that from happening. Other challenges are views, from the client quite often that there are safety issues around solar PV, especially rooftop. But that's come on a long way now. SAS are using glass back panels, which means there's no plastic film on the back, which brings the fire rating up much better. And we also use optimised technology, which allows us to pinpoint any arcing or heat traces within the system, which can automatically be shut down immediately.
Uh-huh. In terms of procurement, how do options like CapEx, PPAs and leasing play out for a business interested in installing solar PV?
So at a high level, Tim, the CapEx option effectively means it's self-funded by the customer. So it could come from funds directly out of their balance sheet, or they could be arranging their own loans or financing. And then the PPA option is whereby your solar partner or developer finances the project by way of a long-term power purchase agreement, and you repay that investment that the developer has made by way of a fixed PPA price per megawatt hour for each unit of electricity delivered over a fixed term, usually around about 15 years. And perhaps Rob can elaborate a little bit more around the leasing options we may be able to provide.
Yes, so a lease agreement is a very simple agreement where you are able to use the savings from the grid that the PV has produced, and the money from that savings can be used to pay back the lease agreement so that you're kept at a level and positive position.
OK, thanks for that. I hear worries such as Britain's at too north of latitude, or we can't generate, won't generate enough in the winter, north-facing roof, or don't have enough roof space at all. So what would you say to comments such as these, some of these dispelling some of the myths that exist?
Well, these myths don't seem to ever go away. I've been in the business for 10 years now, and we have seen these same things crop up every time. You can install on a north latitude, a north azimuth, if you like, of a roof, as long as the pitch is low enough, because it's still going to pick up irradiance, and that's all done through modelling. It is a myth that you can only, have a south roof to install solar PV on. That's completely untrue. Back when SAS originated, we used to do a fair few domestic properties, and actually, if you think about it, an energy use, installing on east and west azimuth roofs is a much better option than adding to a southern roof. And that's due to, with a domestic property, you would be using your energy in the morning, not at home during the day, and then again you'd have that back, that power distribution again back in the evening. So, east and west works really well, and that's all checked against the radiance anyway. In the winter months, there's a myth that solar PV won't work as well. Yes, the radiance is lower, but on a cold winter's day that's sunny, actually the solar panels are going to work more efficiently because they tend to work better once the temperature is cooler. There's a few myths around safety, again, as I touched on a moment ago, but we now have systems in place that can obviously look after and monitor systems, and as long as there's a decent O&M package in place where, like anything electrical, it's being checked once a year, then all of those myths can be busted by a proper approach to how you install solar, how you maintain it, and then the rest of those things are really just taken from a long time ago in terms of technology. Yeah, exactly, and those myths again around why is there a concern over installing on an eastern roof or a western roof. So
you mentioned modelling earlier. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so when we get hold of a customer's half-hourly data, we ask for a 12 months, January through to December, so we've got a full picture of what they're doing during the year. And then we model that data against some software that we use, industry standard software, either PV-Sol or PV-Syst. And that irradiance is based on 12 years of data across the country. And that's not only postcode specific, it also takes into account losses through cables, losses through inverters. So it gives you a really good idea of actually what is achievable day on, day out in terms of irradiance. And that obviously then shows how it goes into the winter months, what you can do. Then you can start to model anything else around it, including storage, to make sure that you're getting the best that you need for the site's demand.
Great, Rob. But on a further note, are there alternative options for businesses that wish to reduce their emissions but don't have the roof space? We've sort of touched on it, but or the roof's too old, they can't. Yeah, so how would they get involved in sort of using solar as an option here?
So there's a few options, yeah. Obviously, rooftop is probably one of the cheapest ways to install solar, but that's not always feasible for some clients. That may be that the roof is unsuitable or the roof is too small, and therefore the energy being produced on that roof from the installation isn't enough. So there are options. You can go for solar canopies or solar carports. These can be installed through planning and can generate more than any roof space that's available. There's also ground mounts, which can be privately wired into the electrical systems. All of these options are now becoming much cheaper and more feasible as the technology seems to get better and the manufacturing of these products, the carports, the EV infrastructure that goes into those carports has now come down in price, and it is a much bigger part of the market now.
So can you tell me what's taken into consideration when sizing solar PV systems?
Yes, of course. So we touched on it a moment ago. Again, it's all about the data. So if we can get the data from the site in terms of their half-hourly data, we can model quite accurately a system that will provide at least their baseline in terms of their energy use. Obviously, you'll get a curve with solar during the day, and you also get a curve over the year. So the summer months, you'll be peaking in power, and in the winter months, you'll have a slightly lower demand. This is quite obvious in, say, a school. If you were to install on a school or a university, you would find that the usage dips off in the summer, and then you have the difference between what the solar is generating and what the demand is on site. So that's when you can start playing in on storage. You can also, worth considering things like the infrastructure of the site. So if there's a demand issue there, you need to make sure that where you're going in your point of connection, you're making sure that that is suitable, that you have enough capacity on the main board, for instance, that the switch gear's in place, that there's enough perhaps room on the bus bar for the site to enable to install solar PV.
And so you mentioned storage just then. I mean, would you say it's necessary to get the most out of on-site PV to have storage?
Again, that all depends on the profile. So storage plays a big part in going forward, I think, to enable optimization and flexibility within any client's demand. What we'd like to do first is to analyse that data that they've given us and try and match that with solar PV, because obviously you're adding a capex cost into storage. Mm-hmm. If you can achieve through solar PV a good offtake that gives them a good return on investment, then it's finding the sweet spot on the return on investment and the initial layout from the solar install itself.
If you do use storage, can it be done cost effectively nowadays? Is it?
Yes, it can. Yeah, it can. There's been a much better output in terms of storage manufacturing over the past few years. So the price is definitely coming down. Whereas it used to be a utility scale industry, it is now coming down into the C&I sector, into small businesses and large businesses, behind the meter usage, exactly that. So there is now a market for it because there's such a mass production.
How does on-site generation fit into a sort of wider net zero for an organisation, Raghav?
So we're seeing it's all down to things like preference, suitability, affordability, or at least the organisation's preferred financing route. We're certainly seeing it squarely form part of a customer's net zero journey. We have and are seeing several customers who've started by simply backing their energy supply with zero carbon sources like renewable and nuclear, and then moving on to more physical solutions like on-site solar and EV charging facilities, and coupling that with things like corporate PPAs, which we spoke about at the last podcast. And in my personal opinion, if I may, there is a certain pleasure in seeing a physical renewable asset on your own site, which gives solar PV a uniqueness in the overall net zero solutions that we can offer.
And so both of you, I wonder if you could tell me tips for how a business could get started on their solar journey. Maybe Rob first.
Sure. So without sounding like a broken record, it is all about the data. So SAS can easily supply a feasibility study to any client in the UK simply by getting hold of that data. And it really, all it means is getting hold of their half-hourly data, getting hold of their site address, understanding the infrastructure. That can all be done at desktop, and that can be done very simply within a matter of days, so that you can be presented with a working document that can obviously progress as you start to go to site, but it gives you a good understanding of what can be achieved on site.
Both technically and financially? Technically
and financially. So we can model using Google Earth, we can model quite easily rooftop systems.
And these feasibility studies, is that any cost to the customer, to the business?
At early stage, there's absolutely no cost to the customer. So that can all be done at desktop and can be provided to the customer within a week normally. And this allows them to go away with a full understanding of what is potentially available to them on site.
Could you give me an example of the type of people you're working with?
Yeah, so recently we've worked with Gateshead Council to provide them with 4 different solutions, 2 ground mounts, quite bespoke, a rooftop and a carport at their civic centre. We've also provided some carports recently for Electricity North West. We've also worked with the likes of British Land, installed on shopping centres and well-known names like the National Trust.
And Raghav?
Yeah, I guess all that's left for me to say is if you're interested in solar PV, it doesn't really matter who your energy supplier is. We'd be very happy to speak with you. So please do contact your EDF account manager if you have one. Otherwise, we'd be happy to hear from you via our email address, which is letstalkpower@edfenergy.com.
And that brings us to an end of this podcast. So I'd like to thank Rob and Raghav.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
And don't forget to listen to other episodes in the series. For up-to-date news and information, go to theenergist.com. Thank you for listening.